Somewhere off the coast of the Bahamas, there's a man currently paying about $40,000 a month to maintain an island he visits twice a year. He's not broke, he's not being scammed, he's not even bad with money. This is just what owning a private island actually costs, and almost nobody who dreams about buying one ever runs these numbers first. Today, we're going to run them for you. The real price tag, the way owners actually make their money back, the hidden bills that quietly bankrupt people who thought island life meant fewer expenses, not more. And whether at the end of all of it, owning an island is genuinely worth it. Welcome to Trillion Dollar Problems. What islands actually cost. Here's the twist nobody expects. You don't need billionaire money to technically own an island. There are genuinely undeveloped plots on the market for under $100,000. A 6-acre island off the coast of Nova Scotia called Half Island has sold for around $60,000. In Florida, a 40-acre plot nicknamed Hangover Island went for roughly $80,000. If all you want is a legal deed that says, I own an island, that's shockingly attainable. But that number is a trap, and it's the first lesson in this entire video. The purchase price of an island has almost nothing to do with what it actually costs to own one. Those cheap islands are empty rock. No power, no plumbing, no dock, no road. You are buying land, not a lifestyle. The moment you want an island with actual infrastructure, a home, electricity, fresh water, a dock capable of handling a boat, the price changes entirely. Developed islands with real amenities typically start in the low millions and climb from there. In hotspots like the Bahamas and Florida, fully serviced private islands routinely list between $500,000 and $75 million, depending on size, location, and how much has already been built. And then there's the top of the market, where price stops being about land and starts being about legacy. The most expensive island purchase in modern history is Larry Ellison's acquisition of roughly 98% of Lanai in Hawaii, reportedly around $300 million. Back in 2012, Ellison didn't just buy a vacation spot, he inherited an entire local economy, thousands of residents, aging infrastructure, and a long-term commitment to rebuild the island's power and water systems from scratch using sustainable technology. That's the ceiling of what buying an island can actually mean. You're not purchasing a property, you're purchasing a small government's worth of responsibility. Somewhere in the middle sit the islands built specifically as ultra-luxury retreats. Places like Niki Island in the British Virgin Islands, owned by Richard Branson, or Lokela Island in Fiji. These aren't rocks with a house on them. They're fully engineered resort properties, and their price tags, often tens of millions once fully developed, reflect years of construction. Villas, staff quarters, water treatment plants, private airstrips, marinas. So when someone says how much does a private island cost, the honest answer is anywhere from $60,000 to $300 million. And the number that actually matters isn't the purchase price. It's everything that comes after it. How owners make money back. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. The smartest island owners in the world are not buying a vacation home. They're buying a hospitality business that happens to be surrounded by water. Once you understand that shift in mindset, the entire economics of island ownership starts to make sense. The most obvious revenue stream is straightforward luxury rental. Neki Island rents for a full buyout at somewhere north of $130,000 a night. That's not a typo. One night, one island, one price tag that could buy a car. And Neki isn't even the most expensive option out there. Some top-tier private islands charge anywhere from $20,000 to over $150,000 per night, depending on size, exclusivity, and what's included. Banwa Private Island in the Philippines has reportedly opened its buyout rate north of $100,000 a night, which gives you a sense of how far this market stretches. Do the math on that for a second. If an owner can book even 60 to 90 nights a year at those rates, which for a well-marketed trophy island isn't unrealistic, you're looking at annual rental revenue in the multiple millions before you've sold a single spa treatment or dinner reservation. Industry estimates suggest that a genuinely world-class, fully staffed private island rental program can generate somewhere between $2 million and $10 million a year. That's enough to make a very expensive hobby start looking like a legitimate business. But renting the whole island isn't the only model. Some owners go further and build a true resort operation. Multiple private villas rented individually, a restaurant, a spa, water sports, curated excursions. This is a completely different business than Rent the Island because now you're running hospitality at scale. Occupancy rates, food and beverage margins, staffing rosters, marketing funnels. Done well, a resort style island can outearn a single buyout model significantly because you're not waiting for one client to book the whole property. You're filling multiple revenue streams simultaneously. There's a third model that's less flashy but increasingly common, the residence club or fractional ownership approach. Instead of one owner shouldering the entire cost, the island is divided into a limited number of private residences or memberships sold to a handful of ultra wealthy owners. This spreads out the enormous development and maintenance costs across multiple wallets while still preserving the exclusivity that makes the whole concept desirable in the first place. It's essentially a country club, except the clubhouse is an entire island. And then there's a quieter fourth revenue angle that rarely makes headlines: conservation and ecotourism positioning. Owners who commit to environmental preservation, protecting reefs, funding marine research, restoring native ecosystems, can sometimes access conservation linked tax advantages, and it also opens the door to a specific high paying ecotourism market that wants exclusivity and a good conscience in the same trip. The pattern across every single one of these models is the same. An island only makes financial sense when it stops being a place you visit and starts being a business you run, with a booking calendar, a marketing strategy, a staffing plan, and someone whose full time job is making sure the asset isn't sitting empty. The hidden costs nobody mentions. This is where the fantasy usually collides with the spreadsheet. Because unlike a normal home, an island doesn't pause its expenses when nobody's staying there. The bills run 12 months a year, storm season or not, guests or no guests. Start with the baseline. Annual operating costs on a developed private island typically land somewhere between 5% and 15% of the property's total value every single year. On a $20 million island, that's potentially $1 million to $3 million in yearly overhead before a single guest check. Staffing is usually the single biggest line item. You can't hire seasonally the way a mainland hotel might because someone has to maintain the generators, the water treatment system, the boats, and general security around the clock every month of the year, whether the owner is there or not. Staffing and management fees commonly consume somewhere in the range of 20% to 30% of an island's total operating budget. That covers groundskeepers, boat captains, chefs, housekeeping, and a management team to actually run bookings if it's being rented out. Then there's insurance and security, which typically run another 8% to 12% of operating costs. Islands are, by definition, remote, exposed, and hard to evacuate quickly, which makes insurers nervous, and nervous insurers charge premium rates. Add comprehensive property coverage, liability protection for guests, and business interruption insurance if you're running it as a rental, and that percentage adds up fast. Utilities are their own beast entirely. On the mainland, you just plug into the grid. On an island, you often have to build the grid. Solar arrays, wind turbines, or diesel generators, plus a desalination or water treatment plant to turn seawater into something drinkable. These systems can cost millions to install and require ongoing maintenance indefinitely. There's no city water department to call when something breaks. You either have redundant systems or you have a very bad weeks. Then come the costs nobody thinks about until they've already signed the deed. Legal and regulatory fees pile up in the form of permit renewals, business licenses, and environmental compliance paperwork, especially if you're operating commercially. In some countries, ownership isn't even permanent in the way Westerners assume. In Indonesia's Anambas Islands, for example, foreign buyers typically hold long-term leases rather than freehold title, and title or lease renewals every 25 to 30 years can cost as much as 1.5% of the original purchase price, arriving as a lump sum surprise decades after the original deal. And finally, the risk that can erase everything else on this list in a single week. Natural disasters. Hurricanes, cyclones, and rising sea levels aren't abstract risks for island owners. They're a recurring, expected part of the business model. Serious owners budget reserve funds specifically for storm damage and seasonal revenue drops because a single major storm can shut down bookings for months while repairs happen, all while staffing and insurance costs keep running regardless. Add it all up, and the ongoing cost of owning a private island isn't a fixed number. It's a percentage of your net worth that recurs annually forever, whether or not you ever set foot on the property again. Is it actually worth it? So, after all of that, the multi-million dollar buying, the 5 to 15% annual bleed, the staffing, the insurance, the storms, is owning a private island actually worth it? If you're buying it purely as a private escape, something you visit twice a year for privacy and status, the honest answer is no. You are paying millions of dollars annually for the right to occasionally stand on a beach that nobody else can access. That's not an investment. That's one of the most expensive hobbies a human being can have, full stop. But if you treat the island like what it actually is, a hospitality business wrapped in a fantasy, the math changes completely. Owners who commit to real rental operations, smart legal structuring to manage tax exposure, and professional on site management have turned islands into genuine 7-figure annual income businesses. Necker Island isn't just Richard Branson's home, it's a functioning luxury hotel brand. Lokala Island in Fiji operates as one of the most successful ultra luxury resorts on earth. The islands that make financial sense are the ones being run like companies with a booking calendar and a marketing budget, not the ones sitting empty while their owner posts a single Instagram photo per year. The real verdict: a private island is a terrible personal purchase and a potentially phenomenal business, and which one you end up with depends entirely on whether you ever actually rent it out. That's the real economics of owning a private island. The price tag everyone sees and the decade of bills nobody mentions. Next week on Trillion Dollar Problems, we're breaking down what it actually costs to own a professional sports team. And I promise you, these numbers are even more insane. If you want to keep seeing exactly how the ultra-rich make and lose their money, one business at a time, hit subscribe because this is just getting started.